Yes, but he can't see. He's choosing to follow even though he can't see. He has he's saying like I thought I saw him, but he hasn't seen him quite yet. Okay. Why can she see him and no one else? Jacob?
Because no one else believes he's there.
No one else truly believes in him. Good. Ian? Okay. Or at least believes that he's going to help. All right. So he does show up, and what does he tell Lucy to do? Brooklyn? Very good. And what is Lucy's response? When Aslan tells her, hey, go back and tell your siblings that you saw me and to follow you as you follow me. What is his response? What is her response? Ian?
They're not going to believe me.
Exactly. And what does Aslan tell her to do? Jacob?
She told her to do it anyways.
Very good. He says, you got to go anyways. Okay? So when she goes back to wake up Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Peter, Susan, and Edmund, Peter and Susan both are like, okay, yeah, no, never. You just were dreaming. He's not really there, etc. Edmund, however, says, okay, well, I can't see him, but I know you were right last time, so I'm going to follow you anyway. Okay? That's where we are today. Chapter 11, The Lion Roars. When the whole party was finally awake, Lucy had to tell her story for the 4th time. The blank silence which followed it was as discouraging as anything could be. Well, I can't see anything, said Peter, after he stared his eyes sore. Can you, Susan? No, of course I can't, snapped Susan, because there isn't anything to see. She's been dreaming. Do lie down and go to sleep, Lucy. And I do hope, said Lucy in a tremulous voice. What's a tremulous voice? Brooklyn? Why is her voice shaky right now? Manny? She's scared to go alone, and she's scared that other children aren't going to believe her. And I do hope, said Lucy in a tremulous voice, that you will all come with me, because I'll have to go with him whether anyone else does or not. Oh, don't talk nonsense, Lucy, said Susan. Of course you can't go off on your own. Don't let her, Peter. She's being downright naughty. I'll go with her if she must go, said Edmund. She's been right before. Oh, I know she has, said Peter. And she may have been right this morning. We certainly had no luck going down the gorge. Still, at this hour of the night? And why should Aslan be invisible to us? He never used to be. It's not like him. What does the DLF say? Oh, I say nothing at all, answered the dwarf. If you all go, of course I'll go with you. And if your party splits up, I'll probably go with the High King. That's my duty to him and King Caspian. But if you ask my private opinion, I'm a plain dwarf who doesn't think there's much chance of finding a road by night where you couldn't find one by day. What does he mean by that? What is he trying to get? What is he saying? He's like, if you ask my opinion, Brian?
Then, if we cannot find a way to get Caspian camp by day, I don't think we're going to find it at night.
That is true that he does think that, but what he's saying is more like, listen, I don't really believe in this magic stuff anyway, and if you couldn't find it last night, you're not going to find it today either. So he's still very, very doubtful. Okay? And I have no use for magic lions, which are talking lions and don't talk, and friendly lions, though they don't do us any good, and whopping big lions, though nobody can see them. Ugh, I think it's all just bilge and beanstalks as far as I can see. Look, he's beating his paw on the ground for us to hurry, said Lucy. We must go now. At least, I must. You've no right to try to force the rest of us like that. It's 4-1, and you're the youngest, said Susan. Oh, come on, growled Edmund. We've got to go. There'll be no peace until we do." He fully intended to back Lucy up, but he was annoyed at losing his night's sleep and was making up for it by doing everything as sulkily as possible. "On the march, then," said Peter, wearily fitting his arm into his shield strap and putting his helmet on. At any other time he would have said something nice to Lucy, who was his favorite sister, for he knew how wretched she must be feeling, and he knew that, whatever had happened, it was not her fault. But he couldn't help being a little annoyed with her all the same. But Susan was the worst. "Suppose I start behaving like Lucy," she said. "I might threaten to stay here, whether the rest of you went on or not. In fact, I jolly well think I shall." Is Susan in a good mood? No. She's like, fine. If Lucy's going to play this game where she's going to go by herself, we don't go with her, I'll stay here, even if none of you guys stay. Okay, she is not having it. "Obey the High King, your Majesty," said Trumpkin, "and let's be off. If I'm not to be allowed to sleep, I'd as soon march than stand here talking." And so at last, after much convincing, much arguing, and much trouble, they got on the move. Lucy went first, biting her lip and trying not to say all the mean things she had thought of saying to Susan. But she forgot them when she fixed her eyes on Aslan. He turned and walked at a slow pace, about 30 yards ahead of them. The others had only Lucy's directions to guide them, for Aslan was not only invisible to them, but silent as well. His big cat-like paws made no noise on the grass. So the older children cannot see him, they can't hear him. The only thing they're following is Lucy. Yes?
Can't they still see the grass moving when he steps on it?
I don't know, that's a good question. It doesn't say.
Invisible things can still make things happen.
True.
They just can't kill themselves.
True. I don't know. He, Aslan, led them to the right of the dancing trees. Whether they were still dancing, nobody knew, for Lucy had her eyes on the lion, and the rest had their eyes on Lucy, and nearer the edge of the gorge. "Cobbles and kettle drums," thought Trumpkin. "I hope this madness isn't going to end in a moonlight climb and broken necks." Why does he say that? What's making him kind of nervous? Luke? He's taking them very close to the gorge. Good. We just had passing period, like 30 minutes ago. For a long way, Aslan went along the top of the precipices, or the top of the cliffs. Then they came to a place where some little trees grew right on the edge. He turned and disappeared among them. Lucy held her breath, for it looked as if he had plunged over the cliff. But she was too busy keeping him in sight to stop and think about this. She quickened her pace and was soon among the trees herself. Looking down, she could see a steep and narrow path going slantwise down into the gorge between rocks, and Aslan descending it. He turned and looked at her with his happy eyes. Lucy clapped her hands and began to scramble down after him. From behind her, she heard the voices of the others shouting, "Hi! Lucy! Look out, for goodness sake! You're right on the edge of the gorge! Come back!" And then a moment later, Edmund's voice saying, Wait, no! She's right. There is a way down." Okay, so you have to imagine. They are climbing very close to the gorge, and it looks extremely difficult and dangerous. Okay? But it's one of those situations where once you start going down, all of a sudden you see this easy path down. But you don't know that when you first stand there looking down. It looks like this is going to be horrible. We're all going to die. But the minute they start taking steps of faith and they follow Aslan, they realize, oh, wait, this is the right way. There is a path there after all. You see what's happening? What looks to be really difficult is actually a lot easier. They just needed to trust him first. Halfway down the path, Edmund caught up with her. "Look!" he said in great excitement. "Look! What's that shadow crawling down in front of us?" "It's his shadow," said Lucy. "Why, I do believe you're right, Lou," said Edmund. "I can't think how I didn't see it before. But where is he? Well, she's with his shadow, of course. Can't you see him? Well, I almost thought I did, for a moment. It's such a rum light. Get on, King Edmund, get on, came Trumpkin's voice from behind and above. And then, farther behind, and still nearly at the top, Peter's voice saying, "Oh, buck up, Susan. Give me your hand. Why, a baby could get down here. And do stop grousing." Why can Edmund now see the shadow? What did he do that has now allowed him to see a little bit of Aslan? Brian? That's right. He chose to go down the harder path, and now he's starting to see Aslan a little more, right? Even though he couldn't see him before, he's taking those steps of faith, and now he's starting to see him little by little by little. Okay? In a few minutes, they were at the bottom, and the roaring of water filled their ears. Treading delicately, like a cat would, Aslan stepped from stone to stone across the stream. In the middle, he stopped, bent down to drink, and as he raised his shaggy head, dripping from the water, he turned to face them again. This time, Edmund saw him. "Oh, Aslan!" he cried, darting forward. But the lion whisked around and began padding up the slope on the far side of the rush. "Peter! Peter!" cried Edmund. "Did you see?" "I saw something," said Peter. "But it's so tricky in this moonlight. On we go, though, and 3 cheers for Lucy. I don't feel half so tired now, either." Aslan, without hesitation, led them to their left, farther up the gorge. The whole journey was odd and dreamlike. The roaring stream, the wet gray grass, the glimmering cliffs which they were approaching, and always the glorious, silently pacing beast ahead. Everyone except Susan and the dwarf could see him now. Okay, so now Edmund can see him. Peter is starting to see him too. The only people that can't are Susan and the dwarf, because they have the worst attitudes about believing in him. Presently they came to another steep path, up the face of the farther precipices, or the farther cliff. These were far higher than the ones they had just descended. I'll let you go for a warning, so you can choose. Go. These were far higher than the ones they had just ascended, and the journey up them was a long and tedious zigzag. Fortunately, the moon shone right above the gorge so that neither was in the shadow. Lucy was nearly blown when the tail and hind legs of Aslan disappeared over the top. But with one last effort, she scrambled after him and came out, rather shaky-legged and breathless, on the hill they had been trying to reach ever since they left Glasswater. So had Aslan got them to where they wanted to go? Yes. He took them what seemed like the harder way, which is why they didn't choose it in the first place. But truly it was the better way to go. And he showed them how to get there. Okay? The long, gentle slope, heather and grass and a few very big rocks that shone white in the moonlight, stretched up to where it vanished in a glimmer of trees about half a mile away. She knew it. It was the hill of the stone table. With a jingling of mail, the others climbed up behind her. Aslan glided on before them, and they walked after him. Lucy? Said Susan in a very small voice. Yes? Said Lucy. I see him now. I'm sorry. That's all right. Well, but actually, this is Susan talking. I've been far worse than you know. I really believed it was him. Yesterday, when he warned us not to go down to the fir wood. And I really believed it was him tonight when you woke us up. Deep down inside. Or I could have believed it if I'd let myself. But I just wanted to get out of the woods and... I don't know. And whatever am I going to say to him? Why is Susan worried about talking to Aslan? Why is she like, what am I going to say to him? Manny? Maybe not angry, but more like disappointed. She's embarrassed. After all that Aslan has done for her, after all the experience she's had with him, she still chose not to believe him. And she's a little embarrassed by that. Well, perhaps you won't need to say much, suggested Lucy. Soon they reached the trees, and through them the children could see the great mound, Aslan's house, which had been raised over the table since their days. Our side don't keep very good watch, muttered Trumpkin. We ought to have been challenged before now. Hush, said the other four. For now Aslan had stopped and turned and stood facing them, looking so majestic that they felt as glad as anyone can who feels afraid. When Connor comes back, I'll let you go, but for a warning. Okay? And as afraid as anyone can who feels glad. The boys strode forward. Lucy made way for them. Susan and the dwarf, however, shrank back. Oh, Aslan, said King Peter, dropping on one knee and raising the lion's heavy paw to his face, though bowing to him. I'm so glad. And I'm so sorry. I've been leading them wrong ever since we started, and especially yesterday morning. My dear son, said Aslan. Then he turned and welcomed Edmund. Well done, were his words. Why does he tell Edmund well done? Luke? Very good. Because this time, instead of turning against Aslan, he believed in him and Lucy. Then, after an awful pause, the deep voice said, Susan? Susan made no answer, but the others thought she was crying. You have listened to fears, child, said Aslan. Come, let me breathe on you. Forget them. Are you brave again? A little, Aslan, said Susan. And now, said Aslan in a much louder voice, with just a hint of a roar in it, while his tail lashed at his flanks. And now, where is this little dwarf? This famous swordsman and archer, who doesn't believe in lions? Come here, son of earth. Come here! And the last word was no longer the hint of a roar, but almost the real thing. Why does Aslan sound so much louder and more like a lion when talking to Trumpkin? Aiden? To prove that he's the real thing. Wraiths and wreckage, gasped Trumpkin in the ghost of a voice. The children, who knew Aslan well enough to see that he liked the dwarf very much, were not disturbed. But it was quite another thing for Trumpkin, who had never seen a lion before, let alone this lion. He did the only sensible thing he could have done. That is, instead of bolting, he tottered toward Aslan. Okay, you have to imagine this is like a tiny little toddler. He's so embarrassed. Okay, he has never believed in Aslan before in his whole life. He's talked bad about him, given all the reasons why they shouldn't follow him. This is just nonsense, blah, blah, blah. Well, now that this massive lion is standing roaring right in front of him, he is so embarrassed, he kind of like walks forward like a child. Okay? Like, I'm in trouble. All right, now look what Aslan does to him. Aslan pounced. Have you ever seen a very young kitten being carried in the mother cat's mouth? It was like that. The dwarf, here's the picture, the dwarf hunched up in a little miserable ball hung from Aslan's mouth. The lion gave him one shake and all his armor rattled like a tinker's pack. And then, hey presto, the dwarf flew up into the air. He was as safe as if he had been laying in a bed, though he did not feel that way. As he came down, the huge velvety paws caught him as gently as a mother's arm and set him right way up, too, on the ground. Okay, so this is kind of Aslan's sense of humor. He's like, oh, you don't believe in me? Okay, fine, I'll show you. He picks him up by the mouth, tosses him up in the air, freaks him out, right? Catches him, puts him on the ground, and then says, Son of Earth, Shall we be friends? Asked Aslan. Yes, panted the dwarf, for it had not yet got its breath back. Yes.
I would have just took Bruce and I would have just made a shirt and just hung him over the porch and
Oh my goodness. Now, you think the dwarf believes in him now?
No, I
Yeah.
think it's one.
You think he is one we're talking to? Now, said Aslan, the moon is setting. Look behind you. There is the dawn beginning. We have no time to lose. You three, you sons of Adam and son of Earth, hasten into the mound and deal with what you will find there. So he's telling Peter, Edmund, and Trumpkin to go into the mound and talk with Caspian and the army. The dwarf was still speechless, and neither of the boys dared to ask if Aslan would follow them. But all three drew their swords and saluted, then turned and jingled away into the dusk. Lucy noticed that there was no sign of weariness in their faces. Both the High King and King Peter looked much more like men than boys. What did I say? Oops. The High King and King Edmund looked more like men than boys. Why do they now look more like men than boys? Brooklyn? Because they what? They do have a sort of that. That's not what's caused them to all of a sudden look more kingly. Brooklyn? Because Aslan, they have spent time with Aslan, right? He's breathed on them, they've been in his presence, and now they're much stronger because of it. The girls watched them out of sight, standing close beside Aslan. The light was changing. Low down in the east, Aravir, the morning star of Narnia, gleamed like a little moon. Aslan, who seemed larger than before, lifted his head, shook his mane, and roared. And on Monday, we'll find out what happens when he roars. All right. I know, I'm so mean. Yes. I will show you the folk-to-folk clip.
Yeah, 3 minutes.